And when the president gives that address tonight, some seats will be empty because lawmakers say that they're boycotting the event.
So while we await the president's State of the Union address, we're looking tonight at the current state of Congress. Scripps News Group's Nathaniel Reed is joining us live tonight at Capitol Hill, where the legislature, Nathaniel, could look different after this year's election.
Katie and Damon, it absolutely could. The president's party typically loses seats in the midterm elections, and that's exactly what Democrats are hoping for. But the chamber itself is going to look different come next year, in part because there's a whole lot of Republicans and Democrats who are just not seeking re-election, approaching record numbers. It's a House and a Senate divided with diverging views of the state of the country.
The state of our union is strong, and it is getting stronger.
America is deeply unhappy with Trump's leadership.
Congress, like much of the country, split over President Trump's agenda. Democrats in the minority have often worked to halt it, and Republican lawmakers have mostly deferred to the White House.
The House will be in order.
It's a Republican Congress that has pretty much backed much of what the administration wants.
But legislating has become more challenging for Republicans who hold a one-seat margin in the House, giving every Republican House member leverage. While Republican members' deference to President Trump has been welcomed by the administration, Congress as a whole is receiving dismal reviews, with 80% of Americans disapproving of the way it handles its job. That feeling likely fueled by the fact that the government remains in a partial shutdown, with lawmakers unable to come to terms on funding for the Department of Homeland Security, just months after a record-long full government shutdown.
Ideally, you'd want Congress to be able to pass the budget relatively smoothly. If you can't do that, how will you possibly deal with some bigger questions?
But much has been left unaddressed by this Congress. Lawmakers have passed just a fraction of the number of bills compared to previous Congresses. Frustration over a lack of legislating is a driving factor in many lawmakers choosing to leave the Capitol. More than 60 won't seek re-election this year.
Some of it is a reaction to the state of Congress, feeling that you can't move forward with bills, that politics is too polarized.
Nathaniel Reed, Scripps News Group, Capitol Hill. And Katie and Damon, in large part because of those possible midterm losses, the president's party tends to lose seats in the midterm elections. There are some Republicans who'd rather run for other office, U.S. Senate, governor, or just simply retire rather than seek re-election with the possibility of losing in the midterms.
Sure, yeah. You mentioned, the division within Congress. A number of Democrats we mentioned will not be attending tonight. Have they talked about their alternative plans then?
There's a number of alternative plans. Democrats are holding two separate events that we know of here in Washington, D.C. There's a State of the Swamp and a real people State of the Union, so to speak, that's what they're calling them. There's a lot of other Democrats who simply say that they will not be in the chamber. We're talking in the dozens who will not attend the State of the Union. To be clear, Democrats are divided. Senator Amy Klobuchar, the Democrat from Minnesota, telling me earlier that she has told members from Minnesota that they should be in the chamber for the State of the Union and listen to the president's speech. Whether there's any verbal protest, though, that remains, of course, an open question. House Democratic leadership has told their members not to do that.
And Nate, let's get back to that partial government shutdown. Are we getting closer to a resolution on this? A lot of people are saying they're just kicking the can down the road, but there's a lot of people who are waiting on that paycheck.
Yeah, Damon, things are not looking good. The House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, telling reporters earlier that it's been some time since the White House and congressional negotiators have had a real conversation. The Senate Minority Leader also telling reporters earlier today, Chuck Schumer, that the White House is not offering any real solutions here. Democrats have repeatedly cast these as common sense changes to the way that immigration enforcement operates. The White House, they say, is not playing ball with some of these changes, and for that reason, they're content to leave the government shutdown. There's no telling, Katie and Damon, when this shutdown will come to an end.
A lot to break down. We appreciate it. Nathaniel Reed joining us live tonight from D.C. ahead of the big State of the Union later this evening. Nathaniel, thank you. And the State of the Union is set for 9 o'clock tonight. You can watch it and the Democratic response right here on News 5.